Welcome to the SARE Ladies podcast, the sister brand of Subtle Asian Real Estate, where our mission is to get more people that look like us participating in the real estate industry. We invite experts to not just talk about real estate, but also about our unique identity as Asian women and the cultural values that shape who we are as investors. I'm Anita Wong.
And I'm Tiffany Lee. We're both real estate agents and investors based in the Bay Area and New York City. Whether you're a seasoned real estate pro or just starting out, there's something for everyone here. So pour yourself a glass of wine or boba tea and join us as we celebrate the achievements and unleash the untapped potential of AAPI women in the real estate industry.
Welcome to the SARE Ladies podcast.
Now let's get on with the show. But first, a word from one of our fabulous sponsors.
I came to the U.S. with nothing but $20 in my pocket and still managed to build a rental portfolio.
If you're a child of AAPI immigrants, I'm sure some version of that story sounds kind of familiar. Well, now you can do the same while still killing it at your demanding corporate job your immigrant parents probably encouraged, forced you to get through real estate syndications. Our friends at Cashflow Marketplace provided the first site that allows you to view GP profiles with established track records. Read and even leave reviews of syndicators to build trust instantly. So leave the stress behind. Passively invest in a multifamily portfolio while still enjoying passive income, steady cash flow, and tax benefits that come with real estate ownership. For more info, check out cashflowmarketplace.com. Now on to the show.
Hello and welcome to SARE Ladies. I'm Anita Wong and with me is Tiffany Lee. Today we are excited to be here with Rohde, president of the law office of Rohde, a commercial real estate firm based in Dallas, Texas, specializing in helping real estate investors build wealth. He is also a real estate investor before becoming a lawyer, which allows him to offer his clients a unique perspective on how to approach and protect themselves in their deals. But most importantly, Ron is a proud girl dad and the father of two with his wife, Bethany.
Today, we're going to talk about Ronald's firm, how you can make money during a recession, and even getting a little personal and talk about him being a girl dad towards the end of the episode, which I'm really looking forward to. Fun fact, Ron was one of our sponsors for our SARE Ladies Sorority Dallas field trip. And one of the sweetest things that happened was Ron brought his daughter to the conference and actually took a little picture of her with our banner and sent it to the group, which I thought was so cute. It was like bring your daughter to work day. Did you ever do that, Anita?
No, immigrant. We never had to do that formally, and for Asian immigrant families, it was just like I couldn't find a babysitter, therefore I'm bringing my kids to work. Like, why is this a fun thing to do? But anyway, rewinding back to the Dallas trip, I mean, I snapped a picture of Ron wearing his daughter's cat ears while watching our conference. And, she was just like laid flat, like perpendicular on his arms, looking rightfully bored as ever.
It was so cute. How old is she, Ron?
She's almost 5.
Aw, I was guessing. I was like, was she 4 years old? I was telling Anita before when I saw the picture, I was like, is she 4? Because like she's still old enough to be carried. But I was like, so I was close. So she's almost 5. Actually, I was on point. All right. So that picture was actually one of our aha moments about our sponsors that we had supporting our first sorority Dallas field trip. And what was that, Anita?
Yeah, and one of the things that we realized with all of our male sponsors, they're all girl dads, and we just thought how amazing it was to see people like Ron who are actively working to see more representation for AAPI women, precisely for the people that their daughters are going to become.
Yeah, even if it's a snooze fest when you're a little girl. So today we're going to talk about just that with Ron. So welcome, Ron. Ron, say hi.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, welcome. So let's top shop first. How did you get into real estate, and how did you decide to pursue law after already starting in commercial real estate?
Yeah, so both of my parents have always been in real estate investors, commercial, office, land, single family. So it's very natural for me. I think one of the stories I like to tell is, I was young and I really wanted a car. So my parents bought me a car when I turned 16. I was pretty lucky. But then that very first Saturday, they were like, okay, here's some keys. You need to go run this over to a tenant's house. You need to go drop these papers off at the mortgage company. You need to go meet this plumber at this house. Like, oh, it's not really what I expected. But looking back in hindsight, it was really informative because, I'll date myself, but this is pre-cell phone days, pre anything. It's a vacant house. There's nothing you really do. You got to let this plumber in, and then he's got to work, and you sit there. And if anybody's sat with a plumber there, they're very chatty people. And so, I got to learn about repairs and maintenance and how to be a good landlord and what that means to making profit. And so after I graduated, it was very natural for me. It's just, okay, I have some money, buy a house. And that's how I got started. I did the traditional SFR route, like so many people, are comfortable with, but built that up, had about 6 doors, had an Airbnb, Superhost. But it was just too much time. And so I sold everything, which in Texas, I thought was a pretty good appreciation play, plus all the cash flow and tax benefits. And I had a good chunk of money, and looked for commercial so I could deploy a lot more money with fewer underwriting. I wanted longer leases. I wanted low maintenance. And so I settled on industrial triple net, which is what I've only been investing in for the last several years, and pretty happy with it. So.
That's awesome.
great.
I love I love that he gave you a car and then he put you to work afterwards. People put them to work, then they buy the car. That is so smart. I'm gonna log that one in the bank for for when I have kids.
Ron, what kind of car was it? What was your first car?
Yeah, so my first car was a 2000 Honda Civic, 2-door, but it was manual. I riced it
Oh.
out. I mean, that was totally my thing. I mean, yeah, looking back, my car was it was green, but I loved it. I mean, I thought it was great. It was all my dreams.
Was it the Lambo green, the Hulk green with the body kit in the front and
So
and the
body
spoiler
kit,
in the back?
I did have like a little bit of mods on the exterior, but it was mostly yeah, it's like it was a dark forest green, so not even Hulk lime or anything. It was a forest green. It was lowered, it had the exhaust. It had, yeah.
Well, did it make the obnoxious noise with the exhaust where you wanted those, right? Like you
I don't
riced
think
it out
it
that
was-
way?
Because the car was mostly stock. I don't think it was that obnoxious, but who knows? My memory is probably jaded, but it was green, and I remember I painted the brake calipers yellow, and I was like, what was I thinking? It just
Wow.
Did you have your LED
why am I
lights
drawing
underneath?
attention to this car? It's like an Econo box. I'm like, yeah, I want attention. I really want.
Wait, but
Is
most
that how you
importantly,
met your
who
wife?
bought it? Right,
What's that?
A, do you still have it? And then B, how did you sell it?
No, I wish I still had it. My dad always reminded me, like, you sold it for too cheap, and it would have been useful to keep around just as a car, because it's super reliable. We bought it new, like we took care of it. But yeah, I put it back to stock. So I took everything off. I cleaned everything. It
Oh.
looked like a mostly stock regular car with 60,000 miles on it. So.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So when you took off the parts, did you sell off the parts? Sorry, I'm like taking it like side to a
Yeah.
side
No,
conversation
I mean, I'm
about
really into
cars.
cars.
Yeah.
So I always grew up kind of into cars. My dad was into cars. I'm still really into cars. So yeah, putting things back to stock. I have a Honda S2000 that I drive on the racetrack. And so yeah, I'm still into cars, but it's not too bad. I mean, putting things back to stock is, I think, easier. It's definitely a lot faster. And if you can sell the parts, great. Otherwise, you just kind of give them away or trash them.
So what's fun is like during these podcasts, I'll find organic parallels. So what parallels have you found like restoring cars and commercial real estate? Because there's a lot of moving parts, right? And I do think that there's a lot of parallels because my dad's a huge car head too. And that's why like I know enough to like just carry a conversation, but I can't get too in depth with it. But it's like fun to just hear what goes through your brain, like what the thought process of like souping up a car and souping up a commercial real estate so it's performing optimally for you. Oh shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
Let's go.
No,
there we
I haven't thought about it from the car perspective. There is an analogy I use a lot, which is like racing.
Mhm.
So, there's like 2 main things that you can do with a car if you want to race. There's something called autocross, which is basically you take a street car, and you drive around a parking lot that has cones. but there's nothing to hit. Your top speed is like 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and then you're braking. The time is very short, so your lap times are like 30 to 50 seconds each. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you get to push your car to the limit. You're like, you're steering, you're sliding, you're accelerating, you're flooring it, you're braking really hard. And nothing against those drivers. Like they're really talented guys who are driving around in a parking lot around cones. And it's a totally, it's a big thing. It's safe. The people that do it, you don't crash your car horribly. The worst is maybe you blow up an engine, but it's contained. You're not going to crash and like die
Right.
for the most part on autocross. And that's what I kind of compare the analogy to, like single family. If somebody is brand new and they're starting off, and whether they have money or not, you don't necessarily put them in a Corvette at a racetrack that's 3 miles long, where they're going to go and floor it up to 170 miles an hour, and then they have to brake to 80. Because if you don't brake, you can crash into the wall and seriously injure your car and hurt yourself. And so that's the analogy I use, because neither path is right or wrong. You just have to choose what you're more comfortable with. And again, using that racetrack analogy, the most fun when I go to the racetrack is getting on the track, driving around, pushing my car, going fast, but then getting off the track in one piece so that my car, I drive my car to the track, being able to drive home healthy and nothing's broken and having a great day. That's the goal. And that's a lot like commercial real estate, because the numbers are bigger. Add a 0 or 2 zeros to everything that you're doing, both in terms of profit and return. But add a 0 or 2 zeros for tracking. And it doesn't matter if you're in like a Mazda Miata, which is, cheap car. You choose which environment you want to play with. And you can certainly spend money and make tons of money on single family route, but you tend to need to scale, right? The max profit you're going to make on a house, 100 grand, 200 grand, 300 grand would be probably pretty insane. But for commercial deals, if you're making 300 grand, it's not worth it. I'll be complete. Like, it's not worth the time and effort. You need to be making a double on your equity. You need to be making 800 grand. You need to make $1 million in net gain after 12 months, just in general. It's just not worth your time. And so that's the same thing, is if you want to play with the big boys, you can do it in a small car. You just have to be aware of what's going around you and not get crushed by somebody who doesn't see you. And you're playing by a different set of rules, which is totally fine. But you also have to understand there's kind of a cost of entry that's higher. So again, like on the autocrosses, it costs like $50 to get on track. You get to drive 3 runs or 4 runs of a minute each. And is it fun? Yes. Can you do it in your street car with 0 modifications? Yes. It's fun and doable, and it costs you $100. To take that same car and put it on the track, it's going to cost you $300 to prepare. It's going to cost you $500 in entry fees and consumables, and you've got to have a helmet and gloves and all these things. But it's just this different experience, but you're still in a car driving around, the track, pushing the car to the limits. And that's the best analogy I have. I don't really like soup up the cars, I think, in that regard. You can certainly do that, but that's probably a conversation for another day, because that's talking about optimizing your investments. That's talking about like really extracting those extra tenths of a second once you're on there. But I think for purposes of this podcast, and for most people I've met through SARE, they just need to get out there. They need to get into the field, and they need to start playing. They need to get around the racetrack, avoid the danger, and they need to collect, every time you pass the start finish, it's like you collect $200, right? It's more like Monopoly. You need to just go around. You need to own the property, generate return, learn what the pitfalls are. And then once you do that, you can worry about going faster. You can worry about going bigger and having more cars on the track at once. But really the fun, and what's fun about real estate investing for me, is just being out there, just playing with your property, but just interacting with the tenants, just figuring out how to manage all the debt, how to do the timing, how to negotiate with these people. And that's, commercial real estate is fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the most enjoyable pastimes. Could I do it full time? Yeah, but I need more money. So that's the trade-off. But I'm able to do it at a level that's, buying 1 or 2 properties a year and managing everything else that we've acquired. And yeah, so that's my best analogy. And I use it actually a lot with my clients. I say, like, look, autocross, you need to get out there in a parking lot. That's totally fine. But I'm probably not your lawyer because you're only investing 50 grand, even 100 grand. Are you going to spend 8K on a lawyer? No, it doesn't necessarily make sense. But if you're investing 300 grand or 250, yeah, you need to spend the same 8K on a lawyer. And that's just where it's different. So I hope that satisfied your car fetish. So.
I love that. Yeah, because I like Anita. Anita will like create these like, a structured question, and I'll just take us off track, no pun intended, with these like little fun analogies and little details that I find out about our guests. So I love that car angle. So I like that you're saying like a lot of these SARE members, they need to just drive. Like,
Yep.
just get in a car and drive, participate and drive.
Get out. And I think single family, again, with the resources that SARE provides, and you have that community of experts, you can find somebody who has literally in your backyard, who has bought the identical property, has had the exact same tenant issues, the same lender issues, the same HOA, whatever. To me, it's the safest thing that you can do. I mean, it's like driving on the autocross track with rubber bumpers, and you've got somebody in the car with you talking to you. That's kind of the mentor or the pods and stuff. To me, in my perspective, what I'm doing is dangerous. It's risky. It's big checks, and you could potentially lose a lot of money. When people are on the fence about jumping into the kiddie pool that they can't even drown in, and they've got lifeguards holding their hands, I'm like, what are you scared of? You may decide, I don't want to swim and I don't want to play in this game. That's fine, but stick to your equities and just put your money into S&P, and then go away though. But like, don't clog other people who don't hold back somebody else who's in line that wants to jump in. Because I won't even say I'm in the deep end. I'm in the middle end. Like, I can drown, the water's above my head, but you're over here in the kiddie pool and you're not even jumping in. And it's like, well.
And I guess like this is maybe a good question. Be like, when should someone call you and when should someone not call you?
I'm open to talking to everybody. So I think that's one of the things I enjoy, is meeting other people who are investors, because at the end of the day, I'm all about supporting the community. And I know that growing up, it's not easy, right? I had a lot of advantages because my parents were already investors. They own their own business. Like, they knew a lot of this stuff. And I have friends now that also invest. So I understand that it's easier for me, but I'm happy to talk to anybody who has questions. And I do, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 free consultations a day. They're 10 minutes long, and I schedule them all back to back. So if you're not on time, I usually cancel you. But I talk to a ton of people, and I don't have a problem with it. I enjoy it, right? I like hearing the engineer from Silicon Valley who's now working remote in Idaho or wherever, and they want to buy a rental or rent out their old primary. Because I talk to a lot of these people, and I would say reach out, because you also don't know what you don't know, right? If you want to use the car analogy, when do you talk to a mechanic? And they're going to say, well, if you wait until something's broken, sure, it's not great. But you may talk to him and he's going to say, well, what kind of car do you have? When's the last time you changed your brake pads? Do they make a noise when you do this? And you're like, oh yeah, it does. Okay, well, you should probably replace them. You don't have to hire me, but you should do it. And I think that's the same way for legal, tax planning, asset protection, even pre-qualifying with lenders and stuff. Just talk to them. You don't know what you don't know, and we'll ask good questions about your situation, about your goals, and then we can give you advice about when to come back to a lawyer or when to pay money. So.
Yeah, and just to just give a plug, what are those things that you can help people with? Just like a list of what your law firm can.
Very common, we do a lot of entity formation. So LLCs, we'll do lease reviews. We review the PSA. A lot of people have questions about like due on sale clause or insurance, umbrella insurance, liability. We talk through those on the SFR or the commercial side. And then I would say our bread and butter and what we do, 80 or 90% of our our focus as a law firm is commercial transactions. So if you're interested in buying a commercial property, retail, industrial, multifamily, we're going to help you draft and negotiate the PSA, the purchase and sales agreement. We're going to look at title. We're going to prepare title objection letter. We'll look at the survey. We'll look at the leases, any other contracts. And then we do a ton of triple net leasing. So for people that don't know, it's, net of property taxes, net of insurance, net of operating expenses. Those types of leases are complicated. And for people that aren't super familiar with them, we look at them every day. That's our core competencies. So that's definitely, you're hiring a lawyer when you have lease questions, and same for the acquisitions or dispositions.
Nice. So obviously on everyone's mind is like talking is about, like all main news about market crash, economic uncertainty, blah, blah, blah. That's been a conversation for a while. So I'm curious about how your law firm has helped commercial real estate investors during these times of uncertainty.
Yeah. I think with this market right now, there's still a little bit of delta between seller expectations and buyer evaluations. So transaction volume has fallen off a cliff. Even with the last rate hike, I don't know when this will go live, but we just had another 50 basis points, and it's just killing everybody, because if you're a debt buyer, the value that you can afford to pay has just gone down. And it's very simple. You can't overpay if you have debt on there. So you can reduce your leverage, you can do all these things, but it doesn't change. At the end of the day, you can pay less for the same property. And so we're helping people either do like escrow holdbacks, contingent on hitting certain financial metrics, right? So you may have a multifamily building and they're at 90% collections, and their NOI pencils out to, or their NOI is actually X. And they say, okay, we can't afford to pay your purchase price because based on your NOI. And the seller is going to say, no, don't worry. Next 3 months, the next 6 months, your NOI will be 95% collections, 98% collections, and your NOI will be this. And so the buyer can say, look, I will pay $8 million for the property if the NOI hits the Y number. But if it doesn't, if it is more reflective of what the last 6 months or the last trailing 12 financials have been, that $1 million in escrow will get returned to purchaser. And so it's I call it like a win-win. The buyer says, I'm willing to pay more if the NOI in the next 6 months hits a certain threshold that the seller promises you it'll hit. And then the seller, he takes on the risk of the performance of the property, realizing what he thinks it's going to collect. And so that way it's fair, right? The purchaser, I'll pay you your top dollar, but only if a certain metric is hit. And then there's some risk on the seller that says, hey, if your property doesn't perform, you don't get that extra value. You don't get that extra $1 million. So obviously there's a lot to go into it. There's a lot of legal language, and the seller says, well, I'm not running the property. I'm not controlling it. And we say, yeah, well, that's a risk you have to take. Otherwise our offer is going to be 7 million free and clear, and we're done. So that's something that we're using to help kind of bridge that gap between buyers' offers and seller wants. The other side is more distressed properties coming up. That physical maintenance has been deferred. The property condition reports are super important, because if they're having trouble making mortgage payments, if they're making distributions, returns to investors, they're sacrificing elsewhere in their budget. And so there may be a lot of deferred maintenance on a building. So on a multifamily, you've got to check those things out and then have contingencies so that you can go back to renegotiate with the seller to cut them down. So I think those are the two main areas, either escrow holdback amounts or deferred maintenance, and having leverage in your contract over the seller when you discover those things.
So
Yeah,
Ron,
I
what's
love that.
the average time for a commercial deal to go from offer to close?
Yeah, so I'd say from a signed PSA, you're probably looking at 60 days, 60 to 75 days. You may have an LOI that's a week or two before that. But yeah, so it's 60 to 75 days, which again kind of speaks to the gap, because the buyer is trying to predict his cost of capital at closing, and the seller is trying to value from 6 months ago in the past. And that's creating a big delta where the sellers look backwards and the buyers are trying to buy for the future.
And I have a question from a real estate broker perspective. How do the commissions work differently for commercial agents versus residential agents?
Yeah. Again, so the first thing is that everything is negotiable. Every single piece of the contract between the buyers and the sellers and the brokers and all the parties involved, it's negotiable. There is no set, there's no standard. I'll just keep picking on multifamily, but I think for small deals like up to 5 million, the 6%, 5% still kind of holds. They may or may not pay a buyer's agent. So that means that if you're represented, the buyer has to negotiate that with their own agent. And so a lot of, buyers agents will try to write it into the contract and say, seller will pay the fee. And I think that works well if you have it listed with somebody. So again, they have a 5% of which, they'll do 2.5% with a cooperating broker. But you have to put that in your LOI and it has to be very clear, because I see that, I wouldn't say a lot, but I see it where somebody will try to bring in an agent later and say, oh, they want this commission. And the seller just says, no, that's not the deal. And unless you're willing to terminate the contract to get your buyer's agent his 2%, nobody's going to agree to it. They are really focused on getting that full listing fee. So not to name names, but like a certain M&M firm will absolutely do anything they can to not pay out. They do crazy things like, oh, I already know this. I had a pre-existing relationship, or I found this email from 4 years ago, so we already had contact with them, and they'll like reject your offer if you try to take their share. They'll say no, And again, this is in a different environment when I think sellers had a lot more leverage. So by translation, the seller's broker, the seller's listing agent had a lot more leverage, but that's how it works. So if you're a broker and you want to represent somebody, you have to understand where you're going to get paid, because nothing is standard. And a lot of situations you may need to get paid from your buyer. So you need to be providing value to them and then negotiate with your client. Hey, how much on this deal you're going to pay me? You're going to pay me 2%? You're going to pay me 1%? Probably goes up to 2.5% or 3% for most deals, up to 5 million. But it's all negotiated and nothing standard. And you can say, look, you will pay me 3%, but I'm going to go try to get 2.5% or 3% from the seller. And a lot of times those go through too. And I see the sellers pay buyers agents on plenty of deals, but they have to really take control of the negotiation and make their commission a key element of the offer, is that this is there. And if you need to pay a higher purchase price, because for better for worse, that's how they spin it to the seller. Say, hey, we're presenting you this offer, we'll pay you 5% more for the property because you're going to pay me a 3% commission. So Mr. Seller, you're getting an extra 2%. Now just agree to pay my fee, which does a disservice to the buyer, but that's usually how it goes. So this is maybe, like off market or something listed, but stale, or, doesn't have a rep. They'll go to the seller and say, hey, you got to pay my commission, but we're offering you an extra 5%.
That's cool.
To pay my 3%. So
yeah, I like it. Love it.
But that's how you get good checks, right? I mean, that's 150 grand for a small multifamily deal, I think.
What are you waving? What happened?
My bike is sitting too still.
Oh.
You can edit that out.
It's okay.
Okay. I'm gonna circle back to share. I want to hear about your top strategies and approaches that you have found successful in helping investors navigate a challenging market.
Yeah, do you mean from a legal side or as an investor myself, like buying?
Let's do legal side. I feel like that's more.
Yeah,
special.
I want to hear the investor side too, though. Like, let's do both. Multi-pronged question.
2 parts. Part one. As a lawyer, it's really always staying on top of your due diligence, your inspection periods, and having an out. And I think understanding exactly when those dates are up, how you can terminate, how much of your earnest money you're going to get back, all of these things. You have title objections, which is another powerful tool or a deadline that you can do that I would say, again, unrepresented people rarely do that. I would say almost never file a title objection letter, but that gives you an out. If the seller is unable to remove these exceptions to title, that can be, all the way 5 days before closing. And if you don't waive it, you can terminate if the seller can't provide clean title. And that can be way past your due diligence. That can be way past your financing contingency. So understanding what the levers are and what the dates, how far they flow, that's really more critical in a situation where the buyer is not going to say, okay, screw it, we'll just buy the property anyway, because the value has probably gone up since we went under contract. When you're buying on either tighter spreads or just things that you're not as excited about, you need to know exactly where all those levers are, and having your attorney be on top of the contracts is the only way to do it. Okay, so from the investor side, the same way we protect ourselves is I think really just reducing the amount of earnest money. From my perspective, we're much more willing to just lose earnest money. I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but in a slow market, we'll get a low purchase price and risk the earnest money if we don't like the deal. And that's because we're able to put a lot less earnest money down and save $500,000 on the purchase price, right? So I can lose more $20,000 earnest money checks if I'm going to save $500 on the purchase price, if that makes sense. But it's all about understanding how many deals you're going to do, how many you're going to look at. I think my perspective is, I would much rather buy one home run deal a year that's great basis, great cash flow, great location, big size, blah, 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 and have instant value when we go under contract. And I'll even lose 20 or 40 grand earlier in the year to find that home run deal, because I believe that we're in an environment where there's more home run deals, right? So there's more time to underwrite. There's more time to put together a really good offer. And so if I can buy at a good discount, even $1 million discount, I would rather take a look at more deals and get them under contract. So yeah, it's a little bit counterintuitive for how I approach that investment, but it's also the market where I'm able to get away with a very low earnest money. If I was putting 50 down on every property, I wouldn't be so cavalier about just losing 100K. You can't. But if it's 10 or 20 grand, you can be a little bit more aggressive in pushing deadlines. So
that's cool. That's I don't know if you play poker, but that's a very interesting poker analogy where it's very high implied odds. You're seeing cheap flops with the earnest money,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And you got to look at cards. You got to pay to look at cards because I'll say in this, as leverage shifts kind of back to buyers, then you have a good hand to start off the initial deal. So you've got a pocket pair and you're like, okay, let's pay to see some cards because your odds are good that you can maybe hit something. Full house.
Mine. Yeah, full house, set mine. Yeah, it's like 1 in 8. Yeah, so actually that's a great analogy, right? You're 1 in 8 to flop a set. So you can pay just depending on how much money you have to start with, you're stacked up.
Yep.
And the high implied odds of hitting that big hand, you're paying a little bit like you said, to hit that home run, that moonshot. You want to see if you can flop a monster and then get super paid out on it, but it's super cheap to just see these these speculative cards. Yeah.
Relative to before, in the last market, it's been a seller's market. So it's like every time the blinds were like $5 and $10, which is really steep to pay. And you're saying well, I got a weak hand. I've got, ace 2. And the blind is and I'm big blind, it's $10. And you're like, do I want to pay that price of admission when I don't even have a good hand? The implied odds are low. I think you want to see it at the table. That's fine. but it just you have to play a lot more conservatively if you want to have a long and healthy life run at the tables. And there's a lot of guys in commercial real estate that play poker. So I will say there are a lot of analogies. And if you enjoy the mental discipline and the adrenaline of it, commercial real estate is definitely, there's a lot of overlap with poker players that like to take, it's not even gambling. I don't call it, it's calculated risk. It is 50% personality, and it is playing the people. But I think if you do that, if you enjoy the psychological negotiation aspect, it's not bluffing necessarily, but it's reading people. There's a lot of that in commercial real estate, being able to read the other parties and figure out what do they really want? What are they really scared of? And how can I capitalize on that with a calculated bet? So
I love this conversation so much. I think I'm gonna repivot from residential to commercial now. That's my it sounds so fun.
I mean, you get rid of a lot of the emotional parts of residential. I've got a lot of friends, and there's people that have way more money than I do, and there's nothing wrong with it. But they have to stack and stack and stack single family houses. And then they have to build a team to do property management. They have to build a whole team that's a team of handymen. It's like, you want 4 contractors on your payroll? To me, it's way too much. Like, I just don't want 4 contractors that fix my 82 doors that are all spread out. It's just a pain. And then to deal with tenants who are like, oh, I don't think I should pay rent this month. I'm like, why? I'm having a hard time, and I lost my job. I'm like, not my problem. But you have that on the residential, especially SFR, right? Multifamily is fine, that's commercial, but people that want to do a large SFR portfolio, bless your heart. I don't.
Yeah. The rake is too high. I'm not going to play a high rake game. And also, it's like, it's more fun when you play with like better players. And I feel like that's what it is. Commercial real estate, they're all better players. You can respect bluffs. They're telling stories with their hands instead of just being like super sticky with just like janky 2-pair. Like, they're playing anything, and it just like, if it's a good market, you could just hold something and still do well and stick. But it's like, you can't lose if you play every hand. But also, like you said, if you want to win in the long term, tight is right. You have to, yeah.
Yeah, and again, that track or poker analogy, there is just a big difference between playing at the table with a bunch of drunk frat guys that are just spilling their chips on the table or spilling their drinks on the table. Is it Texas Hold'em? Technically, yes. Are you playing poker? Yes. But if even, and I would say the analogy is like, I'm playing at like the 1-2 table. No big hitters at all, and if somebody has like 20,000 on the table, I'm like, what are you doing here? This is like a 1-2 table. You're flashing a lot of cash, but there's nothing wrong with it. But you make a choice. And I think the best advice that I'll leave this podcast and then mic drop is, know yourself and know what you like to do, and be true to it. And if I'm a hater and I make fun of you for having a bunch of SFR, don't care. Like, just say F you to Ron and be like, you're doing your own thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to make a bunch of money, you choose the path that you want to make. But you've got to know your own self and not be influenced by other people, because I'm not trying to advocate for commercial. I really just try to be an objective resource to say, like, this is what it is. This is what the life is over here on the other side of the other table. But you choose where you want to play, because it's your life, it's your time, it's your money, it's your legacy. Who am I to tell you what you should do with your time or money? But I want to put it out there that if you want to add an extra zero, or if you get tired of emotional people that you'll never play another hand with, right? That's kind of your point, right? People that just go all in, and you're like, what is this? Why? And then you have to fold because it's just too stupid, and then they leave and they get off the table, and you're like, well, that was pointless.
Yeah.
But in commercial, and I love this quote. I say in all my videos. If you watch my YouTube videos, Naval Ravikant says, play long-term games with long-term people. And that is the best way to establish trust, to establish a very deep level of understanding, so that if I have brokers that I've done 2, 3, 4, 5 deals with over the last 5 years, I mean, I won't speak for them, but like, I have a pretty high level of trust that if they don't lie to me, if they don't BS me, if we get deals done at the end of the day, I have a good working relationship. And that's what you need, so that I can make decisions instead of having lots of question marks and being like, I have no idea what the heck that guy's going to do. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what they're going to do. It makes it hard. But if you play long-term games, then your broker, your lawyer, your lender, even the sellers to some degree, we have deals where we're negotiating second time sellers. And I think your reputation matters a lot more in commercial, because there's fewer deals, especially if you're in a small asset class. You can be in a big market, but you'll have a very small asset class. You're going to deal with the same people. So yeah, that's regardless of what you do, play long-term games with long-term people. And plug for SARE, been around for a couple years now, and I think it's got a long ways to go.
Yeah, I love it. So commercial real estate is like playing the super high rollers. It's like such a small pool, and you have player history with people. It's the same people playing with each other, regulars, over and over again, that you know the history and you know what they're capable of. Like, are they capable? And so I love that analogy so much.
Yep.
Okay, Anita's like, why did you derail this to poker? But I love this. This is the stuff that I love. Just like creating these like fun analogies from real estate to other things that I like to talk about.
Hey, we're going to take a little break, but in the meantime, here's a shameless plug for one of our amazing sponsors.
Hey, SARE Ladies listeners, Tony the CPA Dude here, also your resident SARE tax bro. And with your lovely host, they came up with some great ideas. So Miss Tiffany and Miss Anita here have came up with the tax workout plan. So we're going to help you get cut up on your taxes, also going to help you cut up on your own body. So just like working out, taxes is a monthly thing. You can't ignore it, otherwise you're going to fall off the cliff. So with the code SARE Ladies, we're going to give you a nice healthy discount, and we're also going to give the SARE Ladies a kickback just to help support their podcast. I've had a fun time being on their podcast a couple times this year. They've done great. I really want to see them blow up in 2023. So with your support with this creative tax workout plan and also a workout plan in general, we're going to help you transform your life in 2023. So mention the code SARE Ladies when you talk to me. You can email me at Tony@thecpa-dude, text me at 928-CPA-dude. TikTok's the CPA Dude, website's thecpadude.com, everything's the CPA Dude. So SARE Ladies is your special code here, and let's make this year great.
Now on to the show. Okay, cool. Anita, was that it for the talking shop portion of the podcast? Okay, cool. So let's jump into what is really what really matters in life. Your family, right? We do it for our family. So let's get to it. You're a family man. You got 2 kids. Tell us more about your kids, and how has being a girl dad shaped your perspective on work and life?
So I have a specific opinion about that. And we were chatting earlier a little bit. The YouTube comment was like, oh, your daughter's gonna have so much investment knowledge, or she'll be able to do all these things. I really don't have that as a goal. Like, I don't think I'd be happy if she would want to do it, but I'd be equally happy if she just did something else. The key motivation, and I think this could benefit everybody, is to try to create a sense of confidence, of self-confidence, that gives her choices. Because I feel like a lot of young people, or any people, they feel like they don't have a choice, and they're pressured or forced to do things that they don't like. And that could be, working a W-2 for a really abusive boss, or a company that doesn't value your time or opinions. But real estate, and I don't want to say that passive income, but long-term, high-quality income, dividend type money, will give people options. And I don't want it to be a lot, right? I want it to be like $2,000 a month. That's like, okay, you could go live in a van down by the river, and you can you can pay for $200 of groceries a month, but you are not beholden to any job. You are not beholden to any partner or spouse, or, you can't have a boyfriend that says, oh, if you can't leave me because I pay your rent. I hate being forced, whether it's a real prisoner dilemma or not. I hate the perception that people don't have a choice and that they're powerless to their circumstances. And so I think for being a girl dad, and my wife and I talk about this too. Like, I don't know, we're terrified, but like a thing that scares us, is she going to make good choices? Is she going to be confident? Is she not going to be susceptible to peer pressure or her friends, or a boyfriend or a husband or any of these things? And I'm saying, no, I want to give them a home base that is their own, is their power, and that's going to give them hopefully freedom to make the absolute best choice for themselves, and not feel in any circumstance from day to day that they have to do something. Because if they have this real estate, if they have this income, it's much better than, I think, just giving somebody like a check, or just giving them a lump sum. It's saying, well, if you take care of this, if you cultivate this, it will reward you. And I've already put in the hard work, and I've done a lot of the leg lifting, but you still have to take care of it. But if something is there that can support your basic needs, you don't have to stick in that job. You don't have to do something that makes you miserable. And as a girl dad, it's true for anybody, but I think it's maybe, I don't know, don't get blasted, but like, some women are more susceptible to being risk averse and not wanting to take risk of leaving the status quo because of the unknown. And so real estate, I think, being a girl dad, gives her something more of a backstop or a safety net, because again, right, that real estate will be there after her mom and I are gone. So we'll be dead, and she'll still have that.
Yeah, I love that. We talk about all the time about like how real estate it gives people agency, right? It's like whatever situation you're in, you're not stuck. I mean, you always have something. It's whether it's that backup retirement account, it's sort of that residual income. So when you decide to go on a Euro trip and discover yourself, at least have a couple of rentals supporting those grocery bills and that rent. You're never totally living on that street. And I think my family have the same approach. I also came from like real estate as well. And like my family has always said, doesn't matter what you do, but real estate will be some part of your life. If you're smart, you'll know how to use it. If you're smart, you'll try to pick up some tips from other people and try not to like let it go. Like, don't spend it all in one place. It's just like, if you'll be smart, you'll grow it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
If you're
that's
not,
great.
yeah.
I think that's very true. Yeah, and you still have to take care of it. You can squander anything, and you can give somebody $100 million, commercial portfolio, and if they're the ones in charge, and if they're not hiring the right people, or they want to take massive leverage against it, and take all these second loans, and they can easily lose what they're given. And it doesn't matter how quality it is or how the people are hired. So I think it's great. It's fragile, but if you take care of it, it will take care of you. And we've done all the hard work to, I think, put the foundation, but it can still get burned down to the foundation pretty quickly. So
Yeah, if you don't educate your kids on what the value of the thing you're giving to them is. That is just a funny side anecdote here. My dad restores a lot of classic cars, and he's got like a whole garage full of it. It drives my mother crazy. But like, to your point, you're like, when you and your wife pass away and you hand over this like empire, this real estate empire to your daughter, she has to understand what it is, because it'll, it's basically the foundation. So it's so funny because my dad had a similar conversation with me. He's like, you need to understand how much these cars are worth. So you're not just selling them off for nothing if I go and you don't want to keep them anymore. He's like, please do your research and just like
what kind of car does he have? Do you know the make and model?
He has, I don't know the exact year, but he has a Porsche 911. He has a Porsche 914, which is like, he's like, that's the just for fun one. He's like, that's it's not worth really much. But he's like, take care of the 911 and take care of the fair lady. He's like, whatever you do. Yeah. So he's got
it's a
huh?
240 and dot.
Not the new one, the old from the 70s. My brother
Yeah.
actually got the Z, so it's kind of cute. That's like the father-son car. Like that was like one of my so he has the newer one or had the newer one. But yeah, so that's kind of funny just to take it back to the car part. But let's circle back to being a girl dad, right? Do you have two girls or you have a son and a daughter?
A son and a daughter, yeah.
Okay. So do you see any differences in how you raise them or how like because I saw that a lot growing up with my generation of like boomer parents, that my brother had a very different upbringing than I did. Like they were more overprotective and sheltering of me. And for my brother, he could just go off and do whatever the heck he wanted. And it was just like, go wild. But I was like under lock and key. So what's your take on that, Ron?
Yeah, I think we do try to treat them as equally as possible. I think, my wife and I are very, I hate to say like progressive because that doesn't describe me, but we are very open in that. Like we tried to give our daughter the choice, you can have a car, you can have a screwdriver, or you can have a doll. And she always picks the dolls, and that's totally fine. But we did not feel like we pigeonholed her in anything. And now for our son, he's got a choice. He has like the same cars, the same tool sets, and the same dolls. He can play with dolls if he wants, but he goes for the cars. And he loves little toy trucks. And this morning is a cute story. They were doing the bulk trash pickup. So it's like got this crane and it picks up all the trash on the street. And he was outside with my wife and they were just watching it. And they just walked down the street with this truck going like 2 miles an hour, picking up like the leaves, the bags of leaves. And so he loves it. But I think we don't try to raise them differently. Hopefully maybe some improvements, lessons learned from the daughter, but every kid is different. Every kid has their own personality. So if we try to keep it the same, they're going to interpret it differently or react differently to how we raise them. But no differences.
That's great. All right, so let's move on to like a more serious question. How do you see the role of men supporting and promoting diversity and inclusion in the workplace? And how do you strive for that at your own office?
Yeah, that's a great question. My wife has the shirt and says we should all be feminists. It's like $800. It's so ridiculous, but she likes it. And you ever not seen that one?
Shirt.
It's like we should all be feminists. It's a T-shirt. It's like a thing.
But it was an $800 shirt. That's nutty. Oh my god.
Was it like a YSL? Like what? No, I don't think I've ever seen this, but
it's a Dior shirt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
No, it's here. I'll put it in the chat link.
Okay.
I think you'll recognize it. I thought it's really popular.
This is far too above my budget for a t-shirt. I will say that.
I thought it was a thing.
Maybe we need to start investing in commercial real estate so we can buy these crazy Dior shirts. That's it.
Go into commercial real estate. You can afford $800. We should be all be feminist t-shirts.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's my wife, and I think I support her theoretically, philosophically on that level. I don't want to say that I take any active steps because I think that's kind of dumb. It should really just be merit based, and I will say the one thing that I kind of agree with is some of the implicit bias stuff. People will overweight things that are more similar to themselves, even if it's objectively not as good. So I try to be conscious of that when I'm hiring like associate attorneys or just even staff. But yeah, that's the only thing I really care about is how much money can you make me? But that doesn't apply. So you can be any type of gender as long as you make me money.
That's interesting. I think there's this saying that I really like where it's like if you don't mindfully include, you accidentally exclude. And I think so. I know, like, just looking at commercial real estate conferences and just like the field in general, the industry in general, it's very male dominated,
Yeah.
right? Like you see much more men in commercial real estate than you do see women, and so I'm curious, why do you think that might be?
I mean, it's I think it's one of the last old boys clubs, but other than maybe oil and gas, which has even more old white guys. Commercial real estate is a lot of old white guys, which is a little bit surprising to me because of the prevalence, I think, of even Asian or female owners or controllers of pretty large property holdings. They choose not to participate, and they kind of exclude themselves, whether it's uncomfortable for them or they don't enjoy it or they don't like it. I have clients like Taiwanese or Chinese people that own a bunch of stuff, and I'm like, oh, you should come to this. Like, this is your people. These are like shopping center owners, or these are hotel owners, or these are whatever, industrial. You could learn something. You could find some deals. Good for your kids, whatever. Like, come with me. And they're like, no, 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 I don't want to. And they feel uncomfortable, right? Their English is not like perfect, and they just feel excluded, rightly or wrongly. Because I tend to think, so I'm half Chinese. I don't know if we didn't go through that in the beginning, but my mom's Chinese from Taiwan. My dad's just American. And as my wife always likes to say, I'm white passing. Like, I have an American last name and I look pretty generic, ethnically ambiguous. So I can go to all these things and I don't get any negative jokes or it's really only people that know me that make the subtle racist jokes, which is fine. But it's like they know, like, oh, Ron's our Chinese, so we can say that. Or they're like, Ron's our half Chinese lawyer, so we can say that we're not racist. Like,
Is
no, that's
Bethany
still racist.
Asian? Is Bethany Asian or what?
Yeah, so
Or,
my wife is actually 100% Korean.
okay.
But then our kids look mixed, which is weird because they're 75% Asian, but people like my son is really pale, and people just think he's white. They're always so surprised. They're like, yeah, he's 75% Asian. They're like, no, he looks like a little white kid.
Yeah, the HAPA genes are strong.
Yeah. But back to your thing, I think it is an industry that's dominated by old white men, but I mean, that's probably just happened for centuries and through the millennia, but it's changing. It's changing rapidly as there's more turnover, there's more people that have access to capital, and just frankly, it's like just an interest. But the walls are definitely coming down, and I would say that you've just got to go to these events, and for a while you're still a trailblazer. I mean, if you guys go to a real estate and you're the only Asian female, you just got to own it because you're the first, and I guarantee you're not the last, and it's increasing over time. But that's how it is within our generation, right? I know a bunch of attorneys that are Asian female in Texas, and they're like, for 10 years I was the only Asian female in like Dallas County, the only one. And this is like 30 years ago, but still they endured that for 10 years, being known as just, oh, that Chinese lawyer, or oh, that Japanese. And it's tough. My heart goes out to them because I don't know what that's like. But in commercial real estate, we're giving you the tools that I think you come in on a deal, and if your team is really strong, it doesn't matter who the buyer is. We'll get the deal done, and then we have instant credibility in the community, and people just care about money, and money talks. Yeah.
I think about, like, when you said that, it's like, being called out as the Asian, like, as an Asian woman for the last 10 years. I think about Vivian Yip and how she, she was actually at the SARE Ladies field trip, and she talked about how she lost her hair, like severe alopecia. And just in that time, she decided just to wear that. She took her profile picture, just like totally shaved head, and she sort of turned this thing that kind of would make people shy, make people like insecure about being the only one of whatever. And she turned it into her whole identity. And she
Yeah.
became that person who was like the bald woman, the bald Asian woman, but she stood out because of that. And I think about that, and I want to encourage people, but like, if you've been standing there for 10 years and you're still freaking standing, I'm like, man, like kudos to you.
Yeah.
And it's not a point of just shyness. It's like you've actually embraced it as your identity. And for people that don't want to come out, be like, I mean, hopefully, like a Vivian story is like is inspirational to you. Is be like, if someone can stand out like that, then then you should as well. So I love that.
That's actually interesting because now I want to circle back to the question about Ron being a girl dad, right? You're not just a girl dad, but you're also an Asian girl dad, right? Unless you mentioned, but both your kids look more, I guess, white than Asian, or is it just?
Yeah, the daughter looks more mixed. I think
Okay.
if you look at her, she just looks mixed.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, she'll still definitely have some hesitation. I think you look at her and you don't think she's white, but she doesn't look full Asian. So for better, for worse, I think her experience will be a little bit different than people that look or are full Asian.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
the main thing is any negative stereotypes or things that could hurt somebody's impression of you that are unwarranted. Because again, I represent a lot of Chinese clients, and people with a lot of money, but they have a reputation of not always being as upfront or truthful or full disclosure. And again, it takes a lot of time to change that, where they can show they're committed to the community, they're here, they're buying other deals. It's not like they're just selling something and running away, taking their money offshore. Or if they're a bigger group, from California, but they're making a commitment to Texas. Those are the things that really can start to move the needle, but it's tough. And I'll say that absolutely exists today, that if you're, a Chinese sounding group and you don't have big American counselor, even if you do, they're just going to assume that you're trying to screw them over. And that perception would not be the same if you're just, XYZ Bob's family office based in Austin. They would not presume or give you the benefit on anything, but they would just be neutral towards you. When I think in reality, you shouldn't. You should treat both of those parties on the same footing if you've never had any prior interaction. But that's our unique challenge, and I think hopefully doing this, and I appreciate you guys putting out this content, because I know that there are people listening that want to do commercial or want to do big things in their real estate, and they shouldn't be held back from feelings of discomfort. It sounds so minuscule when we say it out loud, but I know that at the moment, the nerves and the adrenaline and everything, when you're there, it's enough to like make people leave or not want to do something.
Yeah.
But when we sit here, it's like, it's minor. This is your perception. You're going to let somebody else box you out of a deal because why? Just you feel uncomfortable. Like, no, that's a stupid reason. But I think it takes a lot of community support to be like, no, go do it. I did it. And I was uncomfortable. I was nervous. I didn't know what I was doing, but I got it done. And now I can do it again.
That's so interesting, because I feel like I almost want to it sounds so bad. It's like, I want to educate all the dads on how to raise a confident Asian daughter to how and inform how she shows up in the world, right? Because there was an earlier episode that me and Anita made a joke about Asian girl daddy issues. It's very unique daddy issues to Asian girls. But I think this actually kind of gets us to our last question, because I think we're at time. But how do you think the commercial real estate industry can continue to progress in supporting AAPI women? And I think you said that it's very community focused, right? In this space, we need everyone to get on board with it and have that allyship. And what steps do you believe are necessary to achieve this progress? And I like how you kind of backed into it, saying there's these little micro things, because we talk about microaggressions a lot, these little underhanded comments that people say that kind of get under our skin, but we can't really say it because it you're like, am I crazy? Is this a thing that's really happening? Or am I just, like you said, am I just imagining it, right? So I'm curious, what is your take on that?
I think you can't do this if microaggressions is in your vocabulary, because it's a tough business and you have to have thick skin. Um, I can't say it enough, but like I know a lot of lawyers, minority or otherwise, and if you perceive microaggressions, you're gonna die. You're just not gonna be successful because you're focusing on the small things that don't move the needle. And in commercial real estate, everybody is there to make money, and you're there to make money. And if you talk to somebody or don't hire somebody because of a microaggression, you're not going to ever be able to hire a surveyor or an environmental services company. Like, I'm sorry, but there's 15 good surveyors in DFW, and if you interview them and you're like, oh yeah, they're all microaggression. I mean, I'm not talking like racist where they answer the phone like, hey, Ching Chong, how's it going? I'm like, okay, that's racist. Bye. You don't have to hire that guy. But if they say something and they're just genuinely, I don't know, say curious, they'll be like, oh, you're the first, Chinese lady to ever call me. Like, okay, well, first of all, I'm not from China, but maybe, we can work together. That one's still kind of bad, but that's not as bad as, the other one. What I'm saying is you have to put aside those things. You have to have thick skin. You're there to make money, and it's your job to suffer those things, even if other people don't suffer it. But that's not your problem and not your focus. I mean, you're hiring a guy for like $3,000, $5,000. I really don't care what he thinks. I'm paying him. He's going to do a job, and he's going to enable me to make $1 million, $1.5 million. I just need him to do his job. And if it really bothers you that much, you're going to get stuck. And I would say it's like, at this point in time, you're going to be like physically impossible to do your job, because a lot of the trades, a lot of the guys, granted that shouldn't be the main fiduciaries, right? So I don't think you should accept that from your broker. You shouldn't accept that from your lawyer. Your property manager should not do that. Your lender. There's a lot of big people that they should treat you with respect and should understand that. But there's also a lot more that you're not going to be able to function. And so that's kind of my advice for microaggressions. You got to be there for making money. And if the allure of making money is not stronger than telling everybody about this microaggression from a podunk surveyor, that who cares? He makes like $80,000 a year and he lives in a small little ranch house. You just don't care. I mean, he's there to do a job, and if you can't perform it, you've got to either outsource it. You've got to hire somebody that can talk to him and get it done if it bothers you. But at the end of the day, it's figuring out ways to make progress and focus on what's your best unique ability, and delegating or hiring other people to do those things for you to enable you to do this, right? Because again, in my example, you're not going to be able to move forward in Texas if that's something that's important. Maybe you can do that in California, but it's going to be expensive. And then you're going to, on the flip side, be like, well, I've got all these great ESG metrics for my vendors, but now my due diligence costs are 3 times what the market is. I mean,
I hear
maybe
that.
if you're investing.
I think it just sounds, it's just like you have a job to do, and this, it's just about the money, right? You are here to do a job, and you pick your battles, you pick your battles.
Talk to the guys afterwards, after it's paid, after it's closed, after everything's. And if you really like the person, show up at their office or take them to lunch. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do after the fact or once you've had a relationship. But when I hear microaggression, I just feel like, oh, I'm being attacked the first time I've had this interaction with some random bozo on the street. Like, I don't care about you. Do you know that there's like that Mad Men meme? It's a really good one. The person's like, oh, I've spent my whole life, or I can't believe you did this to me. And then John Hamm, he looks down and he's like, I don't even know who you are. That's I think the attitude that you really have to rise above it and to elevate to the next level, because guys should have people on here that are like asset managers of, BlackRock, $2 billion or $2 trillion. You should have people that fought through even worse, right? You understand, like, the environment that we're in is already so nice already compared to the people 20 years ago or 10 years ago, where their leasing agents or like a tenant rep would call them up and be like, oh, is this the property owned by Ching Chong Wong? And you're like, okay, that's really racist. And they're like, no, but my tenant really wants the deal. We'll do a deal even with you because you've got a good property. That would infuriate me. And if I was a landlord, I would be like, F you. I'm not going to lease to you. You don't have to. But then if they're the best tenant, if they're paying the best prices, you have to put your emotions aside to do what's best for the property, maybe what's best for your investors. And that's what I think a lot of the trailblazing Asian commercial real estate investors have done before us. And they've smoothed out the path where after the deal is done, after, they've paid that broker rep $100,000, and after they've increased the value, they've increased the profitability, whatever, they can have a conversation and be like, by the way, I will never do another deal with you if you call me that again. But you can only do that once you have the power or once you've done the deal, because otherwise you're saving face and you're losing out on a lot of money. So I don't know. That's my opinion, unpopular opinion. But
No, I love these. I love these
just
spicy takes.
you can only
Spicy
serve one master. And are you in this to make money for you and your investors and for your family, or are you there to virtue signal and post on Twitter about an interaction you had with a racist, semi-racist? Like, these are microaggressions.
Yeah.
You're not even calling, like, that's the old days where they'd be like, oh, Ching Chong Wong. Oh yeah. Nowadays it's subtle and it's less, but I understand it still bothers you. And I feel the same way. I don't want my daughter to go through that, but it will progress. And I think for people like you, Tiffany, you have humor to kind of diffuse it, but you absolutely should bring it up. But you have to know when is the right time. Do you have a relationship to be effective to change that person's mind? Because I have some of those conversations. People will be like, oh, you're taller than I thought for a Chinese person. And I'll be like, okay, well, that's, but you have to, for me, I have to be in person. I have to have a relationship where we've done something before. I've either paid them or they've paid me. And, it's like the Hispanic community does it too. I feel like a lot of Mexicans are really racist, but they're racist in a curious way.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, you speak Spanish so good. There's no Chinese people. Or like, oh, I love, do you cook Chinese food to my wife? And she's like, no, I'm Korean. And they're like, what? And so you gotta, this is like my lawn guys. This is literally like my lawn guys. And so my wife, she will have those conversations and be like, no, yo soy coreano. And they're like, oh yeah, Chino, like same thing. I'm like, well, do you like it if I called you, Puerto Rican? And they're like, no. And we're like, yeah, exactly. And they don't really think about it. They really don't, because in their mind, Chino is Asian.
Yeah.
And so they use it for everything. But for people that know the difference, you just have to educate them, because it's like old people calling you Oriental. I had a landlord as a client, he always would say Oriental, and he meant it in like the sweetest, kindest, most praising way. But I was like, we really, the people should not be called Oriental. And he was like, why? He was like, it's a wonderful, whatever, culture. And I was like, no, well, Oriental is for things, and like Asian is for people. And he was like, I've never heard that before. And I was like, well, that's what me and my family prefer. But this guy was like 70 years old. He's like 73. I mean, he would probably call it like Burma and like,
it's
island.
Generational. Yeah, it's generational. Like you said, it spans back, and you don't make progress unless you have these like uncomfortable conversations that force people to really face themselves, right?
For me, it takes a lot. Like, this guy was my client. Like, he has paid me money. I have looked out for him. We have done a lot of trust back and forth. We've talked about things, legal issues. We've protected him. And I finally could say it after I felt like, okay, this guy's not going to fire me if I correct his vocabulary. But he was receptive to it. And he's like, oh, yeah, I had no idea. I just always thought. And, I say it all the time and nobody says anything to me. I'm like, yeah, because they don't care to engage with you when you're passing by on the street. But I don't know. That's a very long take, but I get very passionate about it because I do think things are getting better. And if you want to do commercial real estate, if you want to be in real estate, man, you have to have, you can only serve one master. That's make money in commercial real estate. And then you change the world after you have all your millions of dollars. Then you can do all the stuff you want.
And I hear that, and when I think about, and I think the summary is like the arc of progress is long, right? And and it's like Asian people have been, working. I mean, this what we've been working on has been taking a very long time, and yes, we have done a lot. And Asian people have utilized real estate, owning real estate, having money to have a seat at the table, to have a voice. And and it can't be called out. I hear you. It can't be called out every microaggression because there's only 3 people at the table doing business together. And to even have to find a seat there is the point. Like, find a seat. When you're there, then do what you need to do to make the bigger drop in in the water. Then So I hear that.
Just know how to play the game. We gotta play the game. All right, cool. I think we ran over time, but I feel like we could talk about this all day, Ron. We'd love to have you back.
We might split this into 2 episodes at this point.
Yeah. We'll get a market update from you. If the market changes, we can talk more strategy and then revisit this the Asian intersectionality with the women conversation and talking about the bamboo ceiling, the glass ceiling. Maybe when your daughter's a little older, you can give us a little anecdote experience of maybe something that happened.
Yeah. Well, I want to write a children's book for real estate investing. That's one of my other things. I think it would be really good. I think everybody would read it to their kids, instead of just princesses and waiting to be rescued or all the Disney things or. Oh
my God. What would the premise be? I love that.
Okay, so this is go ahead. Off the record. We'll just wrap it up.
Okay, cool. All right, let's wrap it up. The next time you're on the podcast, we're gonna promote your children's book, and that'll be the thing. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron, for all these insights and the spicy takes. Love it. It's not even that spicy. I think we should have the conversation. I don't think anyone's getting canceled for these. And if you do, you're stupid. Don't cancel people. There's so many things I say on the podcast. I might get canceled. Let's cancel. Let's all get canceled. Kidding. But thank you so much for all these insights for our listeners, Ron. Can you tell them specifically? How can our listeners find you?
Yeah, the best way is online. Search for Ronald Rohde Law on YouTube, RONALD ROHDELAW. And then my website, ronaldrohdelaw.com. But it's got my emails, contact. Definitely look for me and reach out.
Thanks so much, Ron. It was great having you on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Here's one last note from our lovely sponsors. Dr. Hua Win and her husband, Dr. Jaime Gonzalez, both optometrists by trade and owners of multiple multi-million-dollar optometry practices in the Dallas area, founded Black Steel Investment Group with a passion to invest to impact. With the foundation forged on 3 pillars, integrity, community, and legacy, they put their investors at the forefront of everything they do. The couple are both seasoned, full-time multifamily investors, syndicators, and asset managers who, together with their investors, have invested in over 6,900 units as general and or limited partners in Texas, Arizona, Florida, and the Carolinas, with total assets valued at over $480 million. Juan and Jaime are always working to find new investment opportunities for their investors. The couple enjoys traveling the world for delicious food and interesting cultures with their 8-year-old daughter Athena and have a puppy named Coco Ollie. Thank you for tuning in to the SARE Ladies podcast hosted by Anita Wong and Tiffany Lee. Special thanks to Subtle Asian Real Estate, LLC, our parent company.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review or follow SARE Ladies on Spotify and Instagram at Subtle Real Estate. You can also click on our show notes to subscribe to our newsletters to stay on top of our news and upcoming events. Until next time, Pod Squatters.